There has only been one successful slave rebellion ever. There have been many attempts throughout history, but only once has it ever led to true liberation. In 1804, on a small island in the Caribbean, a group of slaves and other oppressed peoples not only managed to overthrow their masters on the island, they also defeated the formidable empires of Britain and France, whilst also establishing their own country that exists to this day. That island is Haiti, and this is truly a heroic underdog story of people taking their destiny into their own hands and overcoming insurmountable odds. It all started in 1791, 2 years after the outbreak of the French Revolution. At the time, this little French colony in the Caribbean Sea that would come to be known as Haiti was called Saint-Domingue. Although small, this island was the envy of all European nations. It was France's most successful colony and made the empire enormous wealth. But of course, this wealth came at a price. It was built on the back of African slaves that had been forced to work there all the way from the time of Columbus's arrival in 1492. Although it was owned by Spain and France, only took ownership of the island in 1665. In the eyes of the slaves, it made no difference. They had been oppressed for hundreds of years, and they had had enough. It's important to mention that this was not the only time slaves revolted. Slave revolts and emancipation attempts have been prevalent throughout history. You've most likely heard of Spartacus, one of the most famous instances of slave rebellion during the times of the Roman Empire. But African slaves in North America, South America, and the Caribbean had made many attempts at freedom. They found some success, like the Maroons of Jamaica, who managed to form small, free communities. But more often than not, these rebellious groups failed to achieve freedom and were punished severely. There were many factors that lead to the Haitian Revolution, like the French Revolution that was ongoing at the time that caused chaos throughout the empire, which indeed created an opportunity. But what led to boiling point was the Declaration of Rights of Man, passed in France, on August 26, 1789. It stated, "In the eyes of the law, all citizens are equal." While the French government did not want to release this to their colonies, word spread. This created a fresh hope among the African slave communities living in the colonies, but plantation owners resisted, and the French government continued to exploit them for profit. This ignited a fire that would consume the island of Haiti. The first series of revolts started in 1790 and was led by a man named Vincent Oge. He was a mixed-race citizen of Haiti with both French and African heritage. He was not a slave. In fact, he was a merchant and goldsmith, and was even sent to France as a child. He would later become a military officer. As the French Revolution started, he would join the revolutionaries and seize the opportunity to try and bring rights to those of African heritage living in the colonies. He demanded reform, and that discriminatory laws against those of color living in the colonies be abolished. His proposals were rejected, mainly by the plantation owners who were in no rush to lose vast amounts of profit. However, in March 1790, deputies of the National Assembly approved a law granting voting rights to free people of color in French colonies. But the selfish governor of the island refused to implement it. You could say this was the straw that broke the camel's back. The same month, Vincent Oge would return to the island from France, and this time, negotiations were over. He demanded blood. Him and a militia numbering 300 men planned a government takeover. It would not be a tale of triumph. His small band of freedom fighters were crushed by the French army, many of them being members of the French Royal Division and outnumbering Oge's band more than 3-1. He would eventually surrender to a Spanish settlement who offered the survivors safe passage off the island. But they were betrayed and handed over to the French colonists. Vincent Oge would meet a tragic end, sent to death by a brutal, horrific method of torture known as breaking of the wheel that was reserved for the most heinous of crimes. Although this first attempt ended in defeat, Oge would become a martyr, and his actions would inspire those that would eventually lead it to France's downfall. A 12-year war against the French would begin and would cost the lives of many. This war was not only contained to Haiti, but sent ripples that affected almost every colonial power at the time. Although the public sentiment against slaves were changing, and countries like the USA had just won their freedom against the British, the idea of ending slavery was entering the consciousness of people at the time. It put well-intentioned people like Thomas Jefferson, leader of the Democratic and Republican Party of the USA, in a dilemma. Jefferson believed strongly in the French Revolution and the ideals it promoted. But as a Virginia slaveholder, popular among other Virginia slaveholders, Jefferson also feared slave revolt. When faced with the question of what the United States should do about the French colony of Saint-Domingue, Jefferson favored offering limited aid to suppress the revolt, but also suggested that the slave owners should aim for a compromise similar to that Jamaican slaveholders made with communities of escaped slaves in 1739. As the world was debating what could be done about the situation in Haiti, the rebellion only spread, with new leaders like Toussaint Louverture, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and many others leading the way. The French Empire was in trouble and had to act. Towns were being burned, and vast swathes of white settlers were put to death. It's important to note that there were three separate factions at play: the militia army of African slaves, and those fighting for their freedom, the French Republican Army, who were fighting against the monarchy, and the Royalists, who were defending the monarchy. In 1793, some of the plantations that the rebels were fighting for fell into the hands of the Republican Army. Toussaint, now leader of the rebels, decided to join forces, and the agreement was, if the blacks fought against the Royalists, the French would promise them freedom. Thus, on August 29, 1793, Commissioner Léger-Félicité Sonthonax abolished slavery in the colony. But then the British, scared of losing their own slave colonies, decided to act. In June of 1794, British forces landed on the island and worked with Spain to attack the French. Yet, the British forces soon fell victim to yellow fever. Toussaint decided to pledge his support to the French on May 6, 1794. Toussaint was then appointed governor 2 years later in 1796, and he continued to follow his ideas for an autonomous black-led Saint-Domingue. By January 1802, Toussaint was the head of a semi-independent Saint-Domingue. This was a crucial step toward freedom. But this was also when Napoleon decided to get involved, seeing this as a threat to his plan for world domination and a stain on his country's honor. He sent his brother and 20,000 troops to capture Toussaint and quash the rebellion for good. They managed to capture him and ship him back to France to be executed. Another rebel leader martyred. Just like with Oge, this only spurred them on. The struggle for freedom continued, and the island united against France. This time, it wasn't only slaves and those of color. Almost all non-French citizens of the island came together for one final attempt at overthrowing the French colonizers for good. In 1804, Dessalines, Toussaint's former lieutenant, proclaimed the independence of Saint-Domingue and declared himself emperor. He renamed it to Haiti, after the native Arawaks who lived there before, both the European colonists and the African slaves. The free country of Haiti was born, and the first successful slave revolt was complete. But although we'd love to say things after that were great, but Dessalines, the self-declared first emperor of Haiti, would be assassinated only a year later. And again, Haiti would be divided, but from the ashes of war and years of conflict, the free nation of Haiti would rise and pave its own destiny. And although many challenges awaited the new nation, it would never be colonized again.